Anyway, these are Riley's memories, and they're mostly happy, you'll notice, not to brag. But the really important ones are over here. I don't want to get too technical, but these are called core memories. Each one came from a super important time in Riley's life. Like when she first scored a goal. Oh, that was so amazing. And each core memory powers a different aspect of Riley's personality. Like Hockey Island.
Hey, welcome to CC Talk, a podcast where we see and talk about life and its stories through games, books, songs, but mostly movies. Ever wondered why certain stories stay with us while others don't? Or how we can hate a character in real life but love them in a show? Or what makes a great scene forgettable and a boring one memorable? So stay a while and listen as we probe into what makes us human with the help of clinical psychologist Dr. Joel. I'm Jovilo, I run an indie cinema, and here we go! I have a very different kind of guest, not someone who we usually have here. He's in a way entirely out of the film industry. He is a clinical psychologist. He runs...
My center is called the My Psychological Services Training, and we're a giant one PJ.
We've known each other for longer than we want to. He's a geek like me, in a different way. Like, I'm a Star Wars fanboy, he's a Star Trek fanboy. Woo. And we have own interests, but we both love our stories, we love books, we love movies. And I really thought that it would be very, very interesting to have him on the show to provide us his more professional angle or point of view in stories and movies, right? Because my main question here would be, how or why do we remember certain stories and why we don't for others kind of stories?
Yeah.
Right?
I think that's a really good question, right? So I'm alluding towards the fact that why do some stories or movies or books that we read stick with us more likely than other movies, right? And let me try and recall my biopsychology 101 from undergrad last time. So what happens is that when we encode memories, right, a few things happen, right? So
when you say encode, you mean remember?
Yeah, sorry, getting fancy. So, but there's a reason for why I'm saying that, right? For us to remember something, right? So let's say, for example, my new home, like my new condominium that I'm staying in now. How do I remember how to get back to that place, right? A few things need to happen. First one is I need to pay attention to it. Makes sense, right? I look at my place, I look at the direction of the ways, and that's how I get to that place, right? The next thing that happens is that it enters this thing called my working memory. It's a function and part of the brain. Working memory is basically your RAM. You know, your computer, you've got your RAM and you've got your hard disk space, right? RAM is where your computer does all its processing and all that things before, and then whatever you click save on, it sends to your hard disk, right? Same exact thing, right? So I know the directions back to my condominium, for example. It goes into my working memory, my RAM. So I process, okay, now it's 5 p.m, it's better for me to use the highway, it's faster.
Right.
If it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, normal traffic, I can use the longer way, but it's no toll, no repay toll, for example, right? And then finally, after I use different routes, I realize, okay, these 3 routes are the best. They're all being processed, right? Then I can say, okay, I'm going to go ahead and save it in my long-term memory, so that every time I need to go back home, I don't have to turn ways anymore.
Right.
I can just remember how to go back home, right? So TLDR, that's how your memory works, right? Now, the reason why some movies and some stories stick to us better is because our memories, on its own, if it's factual memory, we're using one part of our brain, which is the factual part of the brain, right? We're remembering facts. But when we look at movies and stories and books and things like that, right? It's different, or it changes the way we encode memories because it also taps into our emotion centers, right? So our amygdala, our brains, right? Because when you watch something like the Titanic, for example, you cannot not cry. You watch something like 40-Year-Old Virgin, you cannot laugh, right? You cannot laugh, right? So what happens then is your memory is then paired up with an emotion, right? Yeah. And when that happens together, it activates both parts of your brain. That's why your memories are encoded much better in that sense. That's why also you will remember not only things that you enjoy, but things that you hate as well, right? And that's the kind of process that happens, right? That's why when you think about the friendships that you've had, the people that you've met in life before, you remember people who have given you stronger emotional reactions than those people you say, hi, how are you, here's a beer, and then that's it. You don't have any interactions with them, right? Same concept there, because you're tapping into multiple parts of your brain.
So Inside Out is pretty accurate. But the characters are the emotions in the show, and they are the one, in a way, arranging and picking which memories to hold on to,
Correct.
Creating those islands that will shape the personality.
Correct.
Oh.
So Inside Out was honestly a therapist's wet dream, right?
Yeah.
Because of that, right, it's such a good way to explain to clients or to simplify or analogize the concepts that we're trying to share with clients in a very simple, easy to understand format that even kids will get, right? So for me, it was a godsend.
particularly love the train of thought sequence because it was literally a train of thought that just went out of its rails and you lose your train of thought.
Correct.
In a literal form, and it's really nice. Then how about how your mind? I mean, okay, so bringing it back to stories, right? Like in Inside Out, they have a memory bank, like a giant valley of memory bubbles, and they have these little guys going around removing
Old memories.
discarding old memories.
Yeah.
So same like with stories, as we age, we get forgetful, and then certain things stay with us and certain things don't.
Yeah.
So I understand that you were explaining the tagging thing and how emotions are tied into it, but is there a way how our brain decides what to remember or not to remember?
So there are some things that you can do to make that happen, right? So using emotions is one way that we talked about just now. Telling yourself it's important, right? Like when you're studying for exam, for example, right? You use things like mnemonics and things like that. So what that basically does is you tell your brain, hey dude, this is important, please remember this information. So you are basically hashtagging and saying, okay, save for later or something like that, right? So there are ways that you can go about doing that, and how we do that is to basically tell your working memory, your RAM, like, okay, this is important, please tag it for future reference, right? And that's why some things we can remember better than others, right? That's why I can remember my mom's phone number, right, more than business partner's number, right? Because growing up, I had to remember that number, but now I've got my phone, I don't need to remember that anymore. I just
Then okay, because I was mentioning childhood memories, right? And some shows when we watch when we were young turns out really different when you watch it as an adult. You know, it can turn out for better or for worse. Is it just as simple as because we mature and then our perception of the world changes, or is there anything else more to it than that?
I think that's a very large part of it, right? So over the weekend, I was doing this webinar and I was doing some research and I found this really fancy Latin term, cogito ergo sum. I think it's something like that.
Sure.
It's by this philosopher called Descartes, and it basically translates to "I think, therefore I am." Right? So I do something called CBT in the work that I do, cognitive behavioral therapy, right? And the premise behind CBT is that our thoughts, our beliefs, color the way we see the world, right? So it's like a lens, right? So if you're wearing a pair of sunglasses with red lenses, for example, everything is tinted red. And with blue lenses, everything tinted blue. Makes sense. So if you have a lot more negative thoughts, for example, then everything around is going to be negative. So regardless of whether you are receiving a new child, getting a promotion, getting married, if you are a very negative person, everything's going to be bad. So when we talk about movies when we watch when we're young, right? When we are young, our ability to discern differences, right, is not great. Right? So, for example, one of the things that we talk about when we talk about CBT, right, is our core belief, right, where our thoughts come from, the genesis of our thoughts, right.
The islands in Inside Out.
Yes, actually, yes, you're right. Now, the thing is, as adults, right, if let's say, for example, your boss tells you, hey, dude, you damn stupid, you made a mistake, right, clean this up, right. As adults, we're able to say, okay, in this particular part of my life, in this particular area of my work, in this particular assignment of work, I screwed up. That phrase that my boss used, "you're damn stupid," does not generalize to my entire life because it's just that one aspect, right? But as kids, we don't have the ability. We can't because we're just cognitively not matured enough or able enough to do so. So when a parent or a friend or a teacher says something like, "Hey, Jovi, you damn stupid," for example, right? That gets generalized. So it doesn't become a compartmentalized thing, it becomes a collective thing, right? So the reason why I'm sharing this is because when we're kids, when we watch information, we tend to generalize things that we watch, right? And that's why a lot of movies we watch as kids, right? We think, oh my god, this is the best shit in the world, the best movie ever. And then fast forward 20 years later, you watch it, you're like, what the hell was I watching? I didn't really like it anymore. Because as kids, when we generalize information, it is the be all and end all of our reality, right? I watched Transformers for the first time. Oh my god, that's the best cartoon series ever. Best sci-fi series ever. And as I grow up, I find things like Star Trek, Star Wars, Ready Player One, and all that kind of things. And then my view on life changes, my perspectives grow and change. Now I realize that Transformers was good for what it was, but it's not the best in that sense, right? So you said earlier on whether we grow up and then our perspectives change. I think yes, that's true. But underlying that is this: as we grow up, our ability to process information, to compartmentalize. So I can tell you safely that my favorite sci-fi genre is Star Trek.
But the subgenres that
exactly, right. So that's not the only thing I watch, right? I watch Harry Potter. I'm a bit potted. I like the British Showman, for example. You know, and I like that kind of stuff, right? we are able to compartmentalize, right? And I think that's why when we watch movies, fast forward 20 years in the future, it changes the way we see it.
Right. So it's not just about perspective, it's also that you are able to arrange your thoughts or at least subconsciously do it better than when you were young.
Yeah. Life experiences as well, right?
Yeah.
So you watch a love story when you were like 5, you're like, what the hell is this crap? People are kissing and it's so gross. Fast forward 20 years later, when we've had first relationships and breakups and things like that, when we watch a love
Changes.
Yeah, it changes. Love story changes. We see it. It resonates more.
Talking about memories and all, I know you're not a very big fan of Blade Runner, but because when I watch Blade Runner, the sci-fi question that they raise is that, are you a human if you have false memories? Right? Because the question that they're trying to bring up in Blade Runner is that if you're a robot, and if you are implanted with false memories, but those memories are really real and really well done per se, will that make you human? Yeah. And so I'm going to ask you that question now, as your credibility as a psychologist is on the line.
From my perspective, I think what makes a human truly human, and I'm not talking about being alive and eating and pooping and what makes a person a person.
Yeah.
Is our ability to make choices and to react to situations our own unique way.
Yeah.
So using the Blade Runner was actually an interesting example because, like you said, what do you call again?
The robots, the AIs. Yeah. So they are, just in case you didn't know for the listeners, is that when in this futuristic world they needed slaves and labor basically. So they created AI or human clones, and they realized that they can't function if they don't operate like a real human being. So to do that, the creators of these clones or this AI, they actually create memories, like not just adult memories, everything a person has in life from their youth to their teenager years to their adult life. So they just draw from every source of different kind of memories and sew together a story or a life for this clone to have. So in that show, like for example in 2049, Ryan Gosling, his character, he is a spoiler alert lah. he himself is a AI, is a robot, but his memories are so strong and so clear to him that he really believed that he might be human. So he was having an existential crisis whether am I an AI, am I a human? And at the very end, like what you said, he made the one thing that truly, or well, in the way the show depicts it, separates AI and human, is that he made a choice, a conscious choice on his own, based on his own experiences in life. So then, that's the interesting part about Blade Runner, right? That's what I'm trying to get to lah.
So what I was getting at was that the reason why I say Blade Runner is a good example, a good choice to have this discussion about is because, right, there's this field of psychology, and I can't remember the exact phrase for it, but basically what happens is that in the court of law, right, especially when you are you have kids as witnesses, right, like young children, like I said earlier on, they're very susceptible to stories being told, right, and for them it's hard for them to discern between reality and stories, right. And to be fair as well, even adults, right, the reason why hypnotism works is because some people are more susceptible to suggestions than other people.
Right.
There's this adage that people say that you cannot be hypnotized if you don't want to be, and there's some element of truth in that. Because if I don't believe it to be true and I don't want it to work, naturally that's a resistance against hypnotism to work, right? And vice versa, like if I want it to work and so on and so forth. What that basically tells us is that the human mind can be susceptible when it wants to be, right? So you said just now that the AI in the Blade Runner series have implanted memories, right? So my question to you is this: how do you know that your reality is real? You say you live it, sure, but how much of it is shaped by what your parents told you, what the media tells you, what I tell you as your big brother, for example, right? So if that's the case, isn't to some extent our memories shaped and molded in a certain way, right? And we can't change that.
And also sometimes we ourselves choose to remember what we want, right? Even though like if it happened, we can, in a way, we can tell ourselves like, I don't want to remember that. I'm not going to remember that.
So we can modify and edit our memories as we like to, right? So moving forward to your question, what makes human being a person, right, is the ability to make decisions and live a life based on, yes, our past experiences, but moving forward, I make my own decisions, I make my own choices, right? And that's what makes therapy so fascinating as well. I can see 3 people with the same problems, similar problems, right? But they have 3 very different outcomes because of the choices that they choose to make. So in Blade Runner, I think that the whole argument was that what makes you alive, what makes you a
Yeah.
real person, and my argument to that is, if I give you 10 situations and you choose 10 different times differently, I think that's what makes you human, because you're deciding based on your experiences, your emotions, your desires, right? I think that's important to consider as well. Because a computer doesn't, right? You give it the same input 10 times.
Yeah, it's
come
just
out the
1
same
plus 1 equals to 2.
Exactly,
That's it.
exactly. For me, 1 plus 1 is 2 when I am a child growing up through high school and all that.
Yeah.
But if I'm trying to tell a joke to my friend, 1 plus 1 is 5. Right?
Yeah.
If I'm teaching that to my daughter, for example, they don't get what 1 plus 1 is 2.
Yeah.
I change it into 1 software plus 2 software is 1 software plus 1 software is 2 softwares, right?
Yeah.
So the ability to manipulate that information as well also makes me human, because it's interesting, it's different, it's unpredictable that way. Yeah.
So there you have it. That will be the third movie of Blade Runner. I actually think it's a really good premise to work on. No, as in like if Ryan Gosling's character or whoever else is a robot and AI and given a choice, like 10 different choices, will he make the same thing again and again? That'd be something interesting to explore. I mean, yeah, that's a possible sci-fi script. There. I'm not even kidding.
pay me my what is it? Royalty fees. Yes.
Then another thing that I always wondered when I watch shows and movies like this, like recently our dad has been watching Breaking Bad, so I guess that would be a very good example of what I'm trying to say here, where if you have a character like Walter White, who is the main character in Breaking Bad, he is a high school teacher who was very desperate in life and just wanted to cash in before he dies of his cancer. That has and the spoiler starts now. So in desperation, he becomes a drug dealer, right?
The drug dealer.
He becomes like the biggest drug dealer in that state and Mexico or something like that. So I always wondered watching that show, if I meet him in real life, I might not like him. But in Breaking Bad, even though we have every reason to hate him lah. I mean, yeah, he's the main character and he has a family he's fighting for. We love him for that. But at the same time, we know he's doing some nasty things, and I think throughout the series, he even killed some people intentionally, whether provoked or not provoked. Well,
spoiler alert. the ring bomb.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
So here's the thing, right? We have every reason to hate him, but at the same time, we adore him. Even taking another popular series is a Game of Thrones. Personally, for me, it will be Cersei, Queen Cersei, right? She is a vile character, nasty person, but personally, I love her in the show. Oh my god, yeah, as a character. And in a way, I respect how, in a very weird way, I respect how strong she is. Well, her honor code is really questionable. She only wants what she wants, but she is so strong in what she wants. She's so sure about it that in a way, when I see it, I kind of like, wow, I respect you. Like you can still do that way. You can do whatever it takes to achieve what you want, and that's just mad because sometimes it's a strength in a way. So I'm just wondering, but in real life, if I'm going to meet these people, I'll probably hate them and I'll probably distance myself from them. Yeah, and then you get characters that the other way around, right? You might hate them in the show, but in real life you might love them. You know, you might even become a good friend with them or empathize with them. So as a layman, I always thought that maybe because in the show they're a bit more, well, they're physically away from us, and then because of that, and then in the show they show their backstory, they show their families, their struggles, and because if you know the context of where they're coming from, it's easier to empathize with them. So I just find it really interesting how the way we relate to characters in shows and in real life is so different. And I'm wondering can it be the same in real life? If we have the same thing, let's say we know of someone from a friend, but instead of watching a show, we're hearing it from a friend. And then that love and hate thing.
I can see that happening, right? So you hear gossip or stories about a person you never met before, and just before you meet this person. And when you finally meet this person, you have 5 hours of backstory on this person, and then you have to decide whether or not this is someone you want in your life or not. And I think you're right in the sense that it's going to be different, because when we watch TV shows and movies and all that, right, we know that we are being entertained. We know it's a story being told to us, right? And I think that's why it's easier for us to like evil characters, bad characters, or ambiguous characters. Like Walter White is a very ambiguous character, right? And the reason why we like it is because, or we are allowed to like it, is because we know it's a story, right? Think about the video games that you play, right? Call of Duty, Battlefield, and all that.
slaughtering masses.
Exactly, you're killing masses of people, right?
But hey, headshots!
Exactly. It's like,
99
yay,
points!
you know, but in real life, you can do that. No, I kill a cockroach and don't poor thing. You know what I mean? But in the video game, we are allowed to because it's a game. It's a role we're playing. It's a story we're being told, right? And I think that's why these kind of characters in shows we like it because there's so much a sense of intrigue. It's so interesting, and most importantly, I think it's so different from what we encounter in real life. Because for the vast majority of us, again, I'm talking about majority here, I'm not talking about everyone. The choice of people we choose to spend our lives with are typically quite vanilla, so to speak. Generally quite nice. You know, they generally don't really have mean bones about them. I mean, some people do, but you know, it's we can close one eye or their good outweighs the bad, that kind of thing, right? So that's the kind of people we choose to surround our lives with. Again, this is the majority kind of thing. There's some people who are in really bad situations, they don't have a choice. I get that. But if we had a choice, we would make that kind of choices. So when we see these kind of more vanilla kind of characters in the movies, right, we don't really resonate with them because it's like Jovi lah, and it's like my brother, whatever lah, it doesn't matter. But when I see a character like Cersei or like Thanos or Walter White, it's so intriguing because it's so different, right?
Okay.
You can imagine if I was Walter White and I had cancer and I wanted to take care of my family, would that be the route I took? Probably not, right? Like I couldn't. Why would I make drugs? It's crazy, right? You contrast that with a real life situation, right? Walter White was a teacher and he had cancer and he died. There was this professor in American University. I can't remember whether it's Harvard or whatever it is, right? And there's a book written about him and there's a documentary as well. It's called The Last Lecture, right?
Hey, good book.
Dude, I've never cried so damn hard.
It's really good.
Oh, it's amazing, right? But same situation. Teacher got cancer, wanted to leave a legacy for his family. Walter White went cray-cray and became a drug lord. This guy did a lecture on his life and wanted to make sure that his kids were able to watch it so that he could learn lessons from him when they grew up, right? I think that's why these characters are so appealing to us, right? When they in Breaking Bad, still to break bad, you know, they become bad, right? It's such an intriguing and such a what if kind of scenario, and that really draws us in. That's why we like this.
In a way, it helps us live a dream or a fantasy that we have. Like, I'm sure some people like, oh, it'd be cool if I can be a thug and then, you know, push drugs in the streets. I mean, everyone will dream to that. I dream to be like Captain America and like fight aliens and stuff.
And
like
that's why people role play in the bedroom. That's why there's so many live action role play clubs like Lightsaber Duels, for example. People have
to live out a fantasy.
Exactly, things that they cannot otherwise experience in their own real lives. They act it out, or they watch shows and watch movies and they resonate with them, right? And that's a big. Ultimately, I think we are still kids at the end of the day, inside of us, and we all want to live out this fantasy dream. All of us wanted to be the knight in shining armor, the guy that could fly, the guy who had force, could manipulate the force, for example. We don't want that. I think that's why it's so appealing to us.
Which is another episode that I really want to bring you on for, which is escapism in shows and all. Because personally, I rely on games to, you know. I mean, everyone has to have their own escape or their own poison. So yeah, this is something else I'll bring you on another conversation for another time. Because if we start from there, it's just going to be another 1 hour long conversation. So okay, you were talking about how we relate to stories and all. And as a fiction reader, fantasy, at a very young age, about I think 15 or so, when I was reading a book called Dritz by R.A. Salvatore. So it's about a drow elf who steps into, it's a fantasy world, and drow elves are like dark-skinned elves. So being dark-skinned, comparing to, you know, beautiful fair elves, they have an impression of being evil. It doesn't help that they worship an evil god in the fantasy world. So one of these drow elves became good, and his name is Dritz. So as he step out into the world and he makes friends with dwarves and elves and humans, they all have a racial stereotype stigma against him, like, oh, you're a drow elf, you're bad just because you're dark skinned. So that's when I was young and 15, I realized like, holy shit, they're talking about racism in a book. But if you're going to talk about racism just flat out like that in the real world, there's no way you can talk about things easily because it's so sensitive and you have to be careful with what you say. But because it was in a fictional setting and he was talking about drow elves, not Asian, American or African, he could, the author Salvatore could discuss and share his thoughts about how we could break down social barriers or the difficulties of having all these stigmas and all. And it's just amazing how with stories we can talk about really difficult topics that we not easily can in real life. That's just great. And so then that's where also I recently had a conversation with another friend. You know who you are, so if you're listening, shout out to you. I watched a recent documentary. Well, it's not a documentary, but a retelling of a rape case. It's called Unbelievable. It's on Netflix. So it's about how a detective in her state, an American state, discovered a rape case and they can't find the rapist. But she couldn't let it go, and she went on a crazy research thing and discovered that other states had similar cases and they couldn't find the rapist. And because of that, she ropes in together detectives from other states, and they work together to hunt down these rapists. So the show does a really good job portraying the trauma of such a horrible event and the stress of the detective and how smart and sophisticated this rapist can be. And he knew that he was doing something bad. So that's the show, Unbelievable. Then I also watched another series called Handmaid's Tale, which is entirely fictional. So Unbelievable is a retelling. It actually happened. It's based on a real story. Then there's another one called Handmaid's Tale, which is a full-on dystopian future of the world gone wrong. Basically, women are secondary, men are one, and that's enforced to the dot. And then, like, women's only value is to give birth, and that's it. That's the world of Handmaid's Tale. And clean. If they're allowed to, then they must be allowed to. That's crazy, okay? So this is what we're talking about, Handmaid's Tale, and it's entirely fictional. So my friend here, she loves real stories, true stories, and she likes when the human nature is challenged and pushed to do more. I mean, it's great to see someone rise up above themselves. So when she watched Unbelievable, it's really painful. You see a rape victim cry, and then her friends abandon her and all that, and she finds it compelling and she finds strength in that. But when I recommended Handmaid's Tale to her, she couldn't even get past like the 4th episode because for some reason, well, she explained it to me that when she watched Handmaid's Tale and when she looked at the world around her, the real world now, she finds it so true and so like the fiction presented in Handmaid's Tale can be believable when she looks at the world out there. But when she looks at the real story like Unbelievable, she finds that okay, it's really bad, this thing happened, but it has ended, so I can watch this and can find strength in it. But in Handmaid's Tale, because it's fictional, she doesn't know where it will go, and to see how dark things can go, because Handmaid's Tale, they show you how dark things can go to show you that we need to stand up to stop it from happening. So that's what Handmaid's Tale is trying to do. So she finds it really difficult to watch the Handmaid's Tale because even though it's fictional, she feels that the possibility of us actually reaching this fictional crazy world is very high actually in real life. And I thought that was just like wow. That's like probably the first time where I heard someone said that fiction felt more real than real.
And let me throw a wrench into your engineer and see where we go then. Arguably, I think this is a lot more about your friend than the shows that she's watching. Because it sounds like and whoever you are, I'm not trying to psychoanalyze you. It just occurs.
I think your point is really interesting. So
right. I think with the what's the name of the show? Unbelievable, right? Because there is an end to it. There is closure. There's a lot more security in it. Because I know however this series goes, this movie goes, I know it's going to end, right? And for a lot of people, that's a sense of comfort there, knowing that there is an end or stop point to this. Compared to Handmaid's Tale, because there's no stop, it creates a lot of anxiety. So I'm also wondering whether that's why your friend prefers Undeniable.
Yeah, she did say that, not knowing where it will go. And because already starting off is so dark, it's just insane.
Correct. So I'm thinking that could be a larger part of why you enjoyed that movie. The Netflix one over the Handmaid's Tale. Because with Handmaid's Tale, you literally have no idea, and sometimes that drives people crazy. Our cousin, shout out to you, Julio, she would tell us she would read the last page of the book first, right? It drove me insane. Like, what the heck is wrong with you, right?
Joanne does that, my wife, and I cannot take it. I cannot.
But again, a lot of people do that because the uncertainty of not knowing drives them absolutely bonkers. They cannot take it, right? So I think sometimes that's what it is. It's just the anxiety of not knowing, right?
Yeah.
the predictability of it all.
So, okay, we've been talking about a lot of our past and our experiences from the back influencing what we do now and the choices we make. How about stories of the future, maybe? Well, like you said, like, okay, if you don't know, we are uncertain about the future, we might not like a story.
Yep.
Then there are some shows that paint a very pretty picture of the future.
Star Trek.
Star Trek, even Back to the Future, if I can say. I mean,
pretty
it's
much.
quite cool.
Yeah.
Flying skateboards, flying cars, back then, especially in the 90s.
3D show.
Is there some reasons why we enjoy happier depictions of the future? And then, like, especially now, it's a trend to show dystopian futures. So, is there some way here that is tickling our subconscious in certain ways?
Well, I wouldn't go that far. I think with the more positive-oriented kind of sci-fi shows or stories, it's either hope, right? I mean, we live in a pretty shitty time, if you think about it, like COVID-19, all the crazy that's going on in the States, all the crazy that's going on in China,
Even
Malaysia
here.
as well, plenty of crazy going on, you know. These kind of shows gives us hope, right? In Star Trek, for example, I'm a big Trekkie, right? And what's the hope, or what's the message that the Star Trek series is trying to tell us? That at some point in the future, the human race gets unified. We're not Malaysian, American, Chinese, Indian, Bangladeshi, whatever it is, we're unified.
We're just humans.
Correct. At some point in time, money isn't a factor anymore, because if I'm hungry, I can go to Replicator and order a cheeseburger, that's fine, right? I think that's the message of hope that's being sent, right? And if you, that's obviously very far away in the future. Right? But even then, also, even in Star Trek, right? You look at the original series, the OG series, right? The one with William Shatner and all that, right? Even back then, they were shouting, or they were trying to tell stories of a hopeful future that has now become reality. For example, William Shatner, James T. Kirk, right? He had the first on-air interracial kiss with, I can never pronounce the name, Uhura, the communications officer, right? Who was a black woman, right?
Yeah.
That was the first ever on-air interracial kiss.
This was way back in the 80s.
Whenever it came out.
Before it was even acknowledged as a thing.
Correct. I mean, to be fair, back there wasn't any African American slaves or anything anymore. But the underlying current was, whites one side, blacks one side, right? And that kiss really blurred the boundaries, right? So you don't talk about money and society and spaceships and all that. You just talk about society in general. Nowadays, doesn't matter. It's fine. It's acceptable, right? And even back then, they were starting to tell stories of hope and possibility, right? And I think that's the power behind this kind of more positive-oriented kind of sci-fi stories. It gives you a possible future. This is what I want to hope for and work towards, right? Now, the reason I think why dystopian futures are good is because humans, by nature, love conflict, loves Schadenfreude. Schadenfreude is the German term of reveling in the misery and the pain of other people. So, as Arsenal fan, for example, watching Chelsea and Man City and Man U all get jumped out, woohoo! And the irony of it is Arsenal actually won one trophy and no one else did, not even Man City. And like, yes.
Not even Man U.
Yeah. Just let me enjoy myself for these few weeks, right? Anyway, so yeah, human beings, we revel in Schadenfreude for whatever reason. We just enjoy watching misery, right?
Animal instincts, man.
Maybe it's that, right? Because I think it's deep down inside of us, that animal inside of us, this caveman ancestor, these things that we have, is still there. It's just not allowed to come out. I think that's also why we like things like MMA and wrestling and all that. It's just something that draws us towards that. These dystopian futures play into that. It plays into the fact that if I was in that scenario, how would I take care of myself? How would I prepare myself? Am I ready to take care of myself? And I think also you ask a question about whether or not I can make the decisions that these characters are doing. Right? Walking Dead, for example, is a perfect example. It's one of the greatest shows ever. And that's why I loved it. After a while, I got a bit drama and kind of lost it. But the decisions they have to make, who gets to survive, who dies, who gets left behind, it's amazing because these are real possible scenarios, right? I'm not saying they're going to be
it's just, actually, we are doing it day to day. I mean, one reason why Walking Dead works really well is because the zombies were not just monsters, but the zombies were just a catalyst or an exaggeration of real life problems we face. So the zombies are just there to accelerate certain events we will eventually do in real life.
There was another really good movie by the Children of Men? The one where they couldn't have any kids anymore, right? That was an amazing movie. It was so real, so possible. And if you think about it, it's actually, there has been some elements of it happening right now. Birth rates are declining. There are a lot more females being born than guys. And you go, hey, hold on a second.
That show is so real. I have a really tough time recommending it as a sci-fi movie in my space because I I mean, at least to myself, I can't convincingly say, "Oh, this is a sci-fi movie,"
No.
because no, it's so close to reality right now,
right.
and the show doesn't have a lot of drama per se because it talks so much about morality and society, and it's a great show.
Same with that game you absolutely love, the last. Is it Last of Us?
Yeah, The Last of
That's
Us.
just another amazing storyline. And I think all these shows they work because it's so plausible. It's so it can happen. It may happen. It might actually happen. Right? I think that's why it resonates so much with us. Like actually, like what if if I'm there? Could I make the same decisions? I don't. Could I?
Then now that you mentioned and how it resonates to like our darker instincts, a very generalized way to say it, yeah. I realized that it's an annoyance for me, a personal annoyance that on Netflix, I tend to find a lot of sexual content. Nothing against it. Once in a while, sure, why not? Especially if there's a good story there, you know. But the problem here is this is sexual content just for the sake of sexual content because Netflix knows that it sells.
Didn't they have that competition? They put a bunch of hot people into an island and they're not supposed to have sex or something.
I don't know.
My God, that was
I don't want to know
that's
anymore.
amazing.
Because I oh my god, just knowing about that now just annoys me.
I'll send you a link later.
I understand that Netflix understands that people like vulgarity, violence, sex.
Yeah.
So they use it to sell, and that's fine. That's actually being a smart creator or businessman. But to a point where I find that Netflix just it's like, oh, okay, we have an average script. Let's just throw in more sex so more people will watch. And okay, whatever, you do you're a creator, you can create what you want. But the problem here is that I feel that as an audience, right, we should demand a better standards of things, especially when we buy stuff or consume stuff. And I find it really concerning in a way that when I go onto Netflix and then when I see the top 10 list, and out of the top 10 list, 6 of them are like 50 Shades of Grey and a variation of the 365 days and MILF. There's literally a show called MILF with like a semi-naked body there on the thing, and then there's another one like what Hotline, and then literally a girl in her bra holding a phone. I'm crazy thing like that. And I just find it like, man, Netflix. I maybe they're good shows in their own category, maybe, but I feel that I don't know lah. I'm not saying censoring is a good thing. I'm not someone who agrees with censorship, but when you push movies like that, in a way, because of where Netflix they hold a certain power and influence with the society. I mean, come on, they reach out to millions of people at any one time, and it's just concerning lah that not only Netflix pushes it to people, but according to the numbers, people are watching these shows and see dystopian futures are coming true.
Sidebar, if you guys ever want a really interesting experience, go download the 50 Shades of Grey audiobook. And when you're stuck in the middle of Federal Highway and the traffic jam at 5 o'clock on Friday, right, go listen to it. It's an interesting experience because when you're listening to the scenes and being depicted in all its wonderful glory, and then you turn to your left, you see this uncle sitting next to you, digging his nose. You look to your right, you see a family there with kids screaming at the parents. It's quite an experience. It's a shared experience. I feel that I think you're right. I think Netflix has figured out a lot. Not only Netflix, to be fair, like any kind of broadcasting or media company has learned that sex sells. Right? You don't talk about movies. You look at I think Spanish, Mexican,
drama,
American Latin TV channels are particularly guilty of this. You look at their weather channels. Holy crap! It's like a porno.
Oh really?
You look at the weather. They're literally Facebook groups dedicated to like weather channel girls. It's just crazy. Yeah, they're telling the weather. It's nothing sexualized about it, but they know that sex sells and they want eyeballs on the TV, on the channel, on the airtime, right? And the sex sells, unfortunately. Right?
Wow.
To be fair, they're not entirely sexist. They also have the guy versions of it, so guys in really tight shirts. But sex sells ultimately. I don't think that many people demand for better quality content. Right? And the reason why I say that is because it's not that we don't want it. I think we cannot take it. For example,
interesting.
The movie Pianist. I love that movie to hell and back, right? But I've only been able to watch the show one time. I cannot bring myself to watch it anymore, right? Because it hurt me. It hurt so fucking bad. Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
It hurt so damn bad. watching that show unfold because there's so much hope being torn asunder.
Yeah.
That one scene, spoiler alert, where the kid was stuck under the wall trying to get through and he got beat to hell and died, right? Literally died. And I just cannot bring myself to watch that movie anymore. So up to now, right, I know what the premise of the movie is about, but ask me details I cannot remember, and I purposely choose not to do so.
Yeah.
And the reason why I think that a lot of people don't demand for better quality content is because they cannot take it. Right? They don't want it. And you think about it, the average human being on this planet right now, let's just use America just because it's a bigger frame of reference, right? Most of them are in poverty. Most of them are going through a very hard time. COVID-19 has hit them harder than most countries. Most of them don't have jobs or very little jobs. We know that healthcare there is it's shambolic. I mean, Malaysia is a bit better because our government takes care of us pretty well. But there it's crazy. You don't have private healthcare, you're screwed basically when you cannot afford to get sick, right? That kind of thing. You're telling me a person like that is going to want to watch The Pianist? I don't think so. I think they'd rather watch Hotbot, Euro Trip, American Pie, because it's a form of escapism. And I think that's what makes Ready Player One so incredibly fantastic as a story. Because
As a book.
Sorry, not the movie.
Not the movie.
Sucks balls, by the way, and stuff. Yeah. Anyway, such an amazing story because it depicts exactly that. People started spending more time in the Oasis because it was such a better place to be than reality. I think that's why people are not asking for better content. At least that's my impression of it, because they don't want it. They cannot take it. I mean, my real life is a freaking Children of Men movie. Do I really want Children of Men anymore? I don't think so, right?
But then again, some people like movies about real life.
They do. So similarly, there are some people who absolutely love 50 Shades of Grey.
Yeah.
Some people absolutely abhor it, right?
Yeah.
I like it just because it's a cultural reference thing, and I read it just because I read it, right? So I think you're never gonna find either or. You're gonna find a spectrum of people, right? Some people, like for me, I love Pianist, I love Castaway, I love
But for different reasons.
Right. I also love Eurotrip. I also love American Pie. I also love the FP. Shout out to you, FP. Or Orgasmo even. Kids, if you have young children at home, please don't download Orgasmo.
That's a show that should be forgotten with.
But my point is, you're always going to find a spectrum. There's no such thing as one kind of movie or the other.
And since you mentioned to the kids Orgasmo, something interesting is how, as someone who runs an indie cinema, and I try to recommend older shows with older topics in mind to the youngsters. And for example, I think one of the best examples would be Shawshank Redemption.
Oh my god.
Yeah, great show, really good show about life. But to get a younger audience to watch it,
it's hard.
Yeah, it's hard, and I don't blame them in a way because they do not understand at all what they're talking about. Nowadays it's about smartphones, social media, but in Shawshank Redemption, those things haven't existed yet. And I'm just thinking like you as a psychologist, and sometimes you deal with younger clients, relating to them in certain ways. And trying to, because let's say you have a very fine example of Shawshank Redemption to maybe share something with them, but of course they might not enjoy Shawshank Redemption because it's an entirely different world already. So is there an easier way to bridge that gap between?
I don't, especially in your line, I don't think so. Because, when you introduce that movie like Shawshank Redemption to, it is what it is. It is a movie based in, like, almost, I don't know what year it's been, like 40s. And it is what it is. This is the movie about a bunch of prisoners in the 80s.
Old men.
Old men in prison. That's it, right? Yeah. I think for me, arguably, it's easier because my concepts in therapy are set in stone, right? Yeah. So we talk about, like, since I said, our thoughts influences the way we see the world, X, Y, Z. My ideas are the same. How I explain it to different populations changes, right? So for an adult, I can have an existential conversation with them and say, you know what, if you grew up in a bad neighborhood, for example, then every time you hear a loud bang, you think it's a gunshot, versus it being something falling down, a car backfiring, whatever it is, right? So I can have an existential conversation with them about that. Yeah. But if I explain the same concept to the kid, I would use the same idea. I'll tell them, hey, you know what? Both you and your brother like to watch cartoons, right? Your brother likes to watch Power Rangers. You like to watch My Little Pony. How come? Right? Same concept. My thoughts govern or change sectors I see about the world, right? My brother likes Transformers because he likes to fight. I like My Little Pony because I like unicorns. But my daughter, for example, right? Totally fine. And from that example, I get to highlight to her that you have different thoughts about things. The way you look at things changes, right? So arguably, I think my job is easier in that sense because my ideas are transferable. Versus yours, it's not because you're recommending a story, a package to them, right? I think the themes in Shawshank Redemption can be replicated in many shows and has been. Right? But when you sell the package to them like that, I think you're in trouble. It's hard, right? And I think with Shawshank Redemption in particular, why I think it worked for us way back when is because that could have been what prison looked like in reality. Now, no, you go on Netflix, I think there is a series called The World's Most Dangerous Prisons or something like that.
I'm thinking Orange is the New Black.
That, right? So what do you have? You have gangbangers, you have drugs, you have people raping guys and girls and whatnot and all that kind of crazy. That's prison to
Now,
right?
in short,
It's okay, sorry, that's what they're pushing a library card, book for you, sir, no, okay, sir, thank you. Like, what in the world? That does not happen anymore, right? So,
what are books?
Exactly.
What are books these days?
Exactly. Prisoners now are clamoring for what? Handphones, internet time, Wi-Fi. That's that.
They're being made to play online games to farm for money.
There we go, right?
Fun.
And I think, if honestly speaking, if I, as a 35-year-old right now, watch Shawshank Redemption now as the first time, I honestly don't know if I would like it because I don't know if I can connect to that story now, right? Same goes if, let's say, there's this movie that was quite interesting. It's a social media based movie. It's a horror story based on social media. I don't know if you've heard it before.
It Follows, is it?
I can't remember what it's called. So basically, like you FaceTime someone and then someone FaceTiming you and then there's someone behind there stabbing you and then you see a stories of Instagram stories. So it's built around social media. Do you know what it's called?
I don't know. I know what you're talking about, but I don't think it was worthwhile to remember.
But the premise is interesting. Like,
Yeah.
Fast forward 50 years in the future, I don't know if it's going to work. Yeah, I really don't think so. Right? Even like things like I Know What You Did Last Summer and all that. It worked back then. Now I've got my phone, I've got internet. I like
all that teen movies like 10 Things I Hate About You.
Exactly.
Bring it on, get over it.
Right. Bring it on, especially. Oh my god, I have a secret guilty pleasure to watch Bring It On. I just enjoy it. It's fun. And then on Netflix that day, it showed me Bring It On sequel. I'm okay to watch it. Oh my god, the worst 90 minutes of my life. Okay, no, I had the worst 90 minutes of my life, but it was bad. Right?
It'd be funny if your daughter loves it and
no.
Hey, look, I like a show that you like.
No, my 7-month-old was super into high five now, which is kind of cool. No, back off.
Then I have to shout out to certain movies like The Matrix. It's old. It came out way back then, but even today when I get youngsters watching it, right, and they still find the concepts freaking mind-blowing. Yeah. Movies like that.
I think because they don't touch on a subject matter that is
timely
like time frame, like Castaway for example. So there's no timeline, so it's fine. Matrix, Lord of the Rings, so that's fantasy, so that's okay. But period shows like Shawshank Redemption, I think it only works for that moment at that time. Even Green Mile was the same thing, right?
But I do have some youngsters that they say they watch it when they're about young 20s. They didn't get it, but as they grow older and then they give it another shot, where then they can appreciate it.
Yeah, so that's the effect of perspectives, experience, life gets in the way, and you have a deeper understanding of it. I mean, easy way to explain this. As a 5-year-old, you watch a movie with your parents, and then that's a sex scene. Your parents get really squirmy. What the hell's going on in this movie? They're sleeping together. They're sleeping in the same bed. I do that all the time with my siblings, for example, right? Fast forward 20 years, when you're 25, you watch it and go, that's when my parents are squirming, right? It's the same thing, if you've never experienced love before, you go watch 50 First Dates, it's Adam Sandler being Adam Sandler, right? But you watch it as an adult having loved and lost love, and you go, holy crap, this person loses the idea of falling in love with their loved one, the one for them. Is it Drew Barrymore? Every single day. How scary is that, man? It's unfathomable.
That's true. That idea of the 50 First Dates, when I first watched it when I was young, I like, okay, cool. But then now when I'm older, when I read it back again, I'm like, oh wow, it's a very daunting thing.
A movie is significantly profound now that I'm older and now I'm a therapist, right? Deuce Bigelow, Male Gigolo. I
remember the title, but I don't remember anything.
The one by Rob Schneider. He's a horrible aquarium technician, right? Breaks this super fancy aquarium and has to become a gigolo to make money to rebuild the aquarium, right? And the story, the premise is basically becomes gigolo, right? But because he's like according to the movie, he's like a low-level gigolo, so he's got to service really funky kind of clients. Right? There was one client who had a thyroid imbalance, so she was like 8 feet tall or something like that. Her feet was as big as his face. So you met a client with Tourette syndrome who would curse every single time and things like all kind of funky kind of clients. And as a kid watching that, it's like, ha ha ha, ha,
Yeah.
Gigolo getting in trouble, ha ha ha, and all that. But as an adult, as a therapist watching it, you know what that story tells me now? It's about connecting to human beings. These people had to find a gigolo because no one else would give them love and care and concern. Rob Schneider was paid to spend time with them, but eventually they became friends after that, right? And it's beautiful because all these people wanted wasn't sex, yeah. They never had sex with. It's just a gigolo. You're supposed to have sex with them people, right? He never even touched them, right? In many of the cases, he just became friends with them, and that's what they needed, right? So as an adult, looking back at it, I'm like, oh my god, that's mind blowing. I should show this thing. I can't give it to my clients, but I wish I could because like, oh, it's mind blowing, right? And that's another example of how stories age really well sometimes. Use Gigolo, male Gigolo. Watch it. Don't watch the sequel.
I don't even think if you can find one lying now. I don't think you can. It's such an
Just don't
obscure.
watch the European one. European one is crap, but the first one is
Such
amazing.
an obscure.
Such good.
Another good one is the Truman Show.
Oh, yeah.
And it is amazing how youngsters themselves are finding out about it because
especially now, right?
but that's working in reverse. That when the movie came out back then, a lot of us didn't get it, and we just like, oh, it's just a show about this weird show. But in today's world, somehow that show relates to this generation more than it did back then to our generation. And it's like totally reverse of Shawshank.
Because I think Truman Show is so much more likely, and it's happening now with your Alexa.
Reality TV.
Correct. Not only that, series of the world, right?
Yeah.
Your phone. I mean, how many of us talk about something random like, I need to get a pair of flip flops because I'm going to the beach, and suddenly your Facebook feed is filled with flip flop kind of like ads and things like that, right?
Off your mics, people.
How is that not Truman Show? Right? Truman Show was basically his life being molded or shaped in a way for the entire world to consume. And that's us right now, isn't it? Someone said it once, right? If an app is free, you're the product, right? Facebook doesn't make money off us. Facebook makes money off all the businesses who want to sell products to us. And I don't know how many of you guys have tried Facebook ads before, but the granular content you're able to refine into is scary. I can find you if I wanted to.
So on that note, I think we can call this an episode because there's so much more to talk about. I'm probably going to bring you on. Really, for escapism, we should. So before we end, I usually do one last thing, and well, it's called One Last Thing, where we just share about anything under the sun that you want to share about. You might have read a book, listened to a song, or maybe just walk down the street and found a tree really pretty. Anything that you want to share, and this is where we do our one last thing.
Good question, but I really don't know. Honestly speaking, I haven't been the greatest at this, at stopping and smelling the coffee. I've just been busy AF, right? I guess what I've been doing a lot of recently is trying to switch off, from my phone or my computer and all that. Because I'm starting to realize that my 5-year-old, she's getting bigger and she's getting more demanding of our time. Rightly so, right? Because she's got a baby sister and we spend a lot of time with baby sister because of necessity, right? So I think that's probably my one last thing, right? Turn off your phone, turn off your laptops, turn off your TVs, and just spend half an hour, 1 hour with someone, with something, right? Even by yourself, I think that's really important. And I think if you can go to your room, turn off your lights, turn off everything else, and just be there for 5 minutes, right? You'll be surprised how scary it is. Not because you're afraid that the monster's going to come and grab you, but the silence really gets to you.
We tend to forget how quiet the world can be.
Yeah. So try that on Jill. And I do that with my daughters, right? I spend time with them, but maybe there's something you guys should try. See, I'm not great at it, don't get me wrong. My wife will be first to tell you, and she'll write my ass hard because of it, because she says you're not spending enough time with kids. But I try. So that's probably my one last thing.
For me, it would be that during the lockdown period, I rediscovered something that I used to do when I was younger, when the world was simpler and less things to do and worry about. Is just to something like what you said, you switch off the lights, close your eyes, but for me is that you listen to good songs. So I rediscovered this during lockdown because I had so much time at home. So you just close your eyes, listen, put on good headphones if you can, good audio will help. And the one thing that I have to say is, if you haven't listened to the Meteora album or the Hybrid Theory album by Linkin Park, Hybrid Theory and Meteora, these two, go listen to it. If you have frustrations, if you have a lot of things to let out, a lot of negativity to let out. I feel like songs nowadays are so much about partying and sex and girlfriends and boyfriends that we don't have songs about letting go of stress and the darkness of life, if you want to say.
You say that, right? You know one album that does that for me, that makes me really think, right, and surprisingly, right, is Macklemore. Have you heard Macklemore's album?
Macklemore?
The rapper that sang the...
Not Mac Miller. Oh no, I don't know.
Dude, if you want to have music that makes you think about things,
Yeah.
his shit is really, really good. Like, I mean, yeah, shout out to him because it's good music, it sounds great, and the messages behind it are really, really good stuff. Check it out.
So yeah, if you have nothing to do, if you have 1 hour, like a few minutes to spend, highly recommend it. It's really good, and you will feel quite
Transcendent.
transcendent. So yeah, thank you for listening again. We are on Facebook, Instagram. You can find our podcast on Spotify, iTunes, wherever else, or just click on the website link on our Facebook. Follow us, subscribe to us, blah blah blah. Thank you.
See you guys.